maybe this is a good transition to a really deep topic, which is the Philosopher's Stone. Because we have faith in some ideal that you're accurately saying. We don't really know if it will work. We have this long literature of Austrian economics and libertarianism saying that we needed the sly roundabout way to take money out of the hands of government to build a sustainable civilization, but we don't actually know because we've never seen it. And this, I mean, maybe you could just introduce the Philosopher's Stone. Wasn't this premised on working towards this ideal of some incorruptible substance that would save the world or serve as an antidote to tyranny? And this is an excerpt from your book, Maps of Meaning, by the way.
I recognized it. I wrote each of those sentences like 50 times. Yeah. They're pretty much embedded in my brain. Well, we've certainly been searching forever for an incorruptible storehouse of value.
Yes.
That's definitely the case. And that is associated, at least in part, with our realization for the necessity of work, because work doesn't work without a storehouse of value.
Right.
And you know, interestingly enough, a lot of where you store value is in your reputation. Right? Mm-hmm. I mean,
the original store of value.
Yeah, the original store of value, well, even now, for that matter, your brand, the value of your brand is the value of your reputation. The brand just represents your reputation, and so the incorruptible storehouse of value is your reputation, and you know, there is a religious element to that idea, because that's in some sense the idea of storing up treasure in heaven. Mm-hmm. Now, the more incorruptible you are as a person, the better your reputation, and that's the most reliable storehouse of value you have. And that's right, that's true, and it's kind of surprising that we don't know that so pragmatically. I guess it's partly because we're still possessed by a kind of Marxist guilt about our productive enterprises. You know, we are kind of enticed into believing that if we store value, there's something selfish about that.
Right.
But that's not the case at all if it's the case that the best place to store value is in your reputation, and therefore you want to be the most ethical actor possible. And I would say that would also be the person who's most fun to play with. You know, when we can think about that technically for a second, and I think this is worth doing. Some of you may have heard me talk about this before, but you know, parents often tell their children when they're playing a game, they say, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose, it matters how you play the game. And they often tell that to children who are bad losers or bad winners, because you can be both. And if you're a bad winner, then maybe you're highly skilled, but you hog the ball and you're not a good team player and you're just no fun. You win, but you're just no fun. And if you're a bad loser, the same thing. And what parents are telling their children in some sense is, don't win at the cost of being no fun. And you might say, well, why is that relevant? And the answer is, well, if people don't find you fun to play with, then they won't play with you and you lose. And so you might win the game, but you lose life. You lose your life. And so your reputation is a reflection of your desirability as a voluntary play partner.
How many games you're invited to, right?
You bet, you bet. And to think about it as invitation is right. You know, I've been talking to some religious people, lots of them, and Islamic people and Jewish people and Christian people primarily. And I've been trying to conceptualize the relationship between religious schools. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that I talked to an Islamic traditionalist a while back, Muhammad Hijab was his name, and it was very interesting. And one of the things that was extremely interesting about it, it's kind of a rough conversation to begin with, because he was sort of hammering at me for a while. But after that died down, we actually had a conversation, and it was quite a productive conversation. We talked about the use of force in belief, because I say, well, among Islamic traditionalists, is your belief a matter of voluntary choice? And he insisted that the answer to that was yes, fundamentally. And I thought, well, that's lovely to hear that stated as an explicit principle, because then hypothetically all of us could start to conceptualize the conflict, the competition between religious traditions. Most properly undertaken would be a competition between invitations. You think, so if you want to evangelize most effectively, how do you do that? Well, the answer is by example, and by being the sort of person that other people want to be around and be like. And that's, if you want to shine the light of your religious belief, it's either that or compulsion. Right, and maybe we won't trust the people who use compulsion. How about that? Whereas, so we unroll this back. You store value in your reputation, and that means you store value in the ethics of your behavior. The Bitcoin notion, I suppose, in some sense, is you have an unerring marker for that now.
Right.
So, well,
I would.
Hey, that'd be something.
If I could add here, perhaps too, that we would also seek to store our economic value in the money with the best reputation. Right. That's what the U.S. dollar is currently. What gold is historically.
Yeah, and those are promises.
Yes.
Like fundamentally, you could ask, well, what is money? Money is a promise.
Yes, right.
So it's based on trust.
Contract with the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, and with strangers, right? With people you don't know, which is really quite remarkable. And so it's all dependent on interpersonal trust, and well, that's dependent on all sorts of fundamental things.
Right.
But because it's dependent on trust, you would think the most trustworthy currency, well, hopefully that would be the one that rises to the top.
Yeah, there's a work by a great thinker in the space named Nick Szabo, and he actually describes money as the trust minimized asset. And what he means by that is that wherever you can store your economic value that's maximally insulated from the opinions and actions of others, you don't need to trust others, right? We don't need to trust. I don't need to trust that you trust gold. Gold just has a market cap by the free market.
We can trust by assumption.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, and that actually constitutes wealth.
Minimizing interpersonal trust to maximize.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I had this experience. I played a lot with eBay, and eBay was, when it first made itself manifest, people were trying to market. What do you call that? I write you a check that bounces, and
auction. You
send me junk, and and eBay dies, and so you have a third party verify the transactions, right? Escrow.
Okay.
So people marketed their escrow services for eBay, and for a percentage of the transaction, they would verify the exchange. But it turned out that people were so honest, it was unnecessary, like seriously unnecessary. And then, if you played on eBay for any length of time, you soon came to realize they started eventually putting in reputational markers, right, which was percentage of satisfied customers. And if you fell below, like if 98% of your customers were satisfied, you were doing a bad job. Like if you were a good seller, it was 99 or 100. Some of them, many people with 10,000 transactions had 100% ratings. And so that was so cool to see, because and it shows you how civilized a society can be, where the default exchange between geographically distant strangers who will never meet again is honesty.
Yeah.
And you think that's the sign of wealth.
Right.
That's the unerring sign of wealth. If you live in a culture where the default transaction between strangers is honest exchange, everyone's rich.
And this was premised on the transparency. This case with eBay was premised both on the transparency of the system and presumably the predictability of the rules, right? The reputation system, how it works.
Yeah, yes. So certainly eBay was set up so it didn't interfere with that.
Right.
But I think it was predicated on something even deeper than that, which was that people, and this is, I really like this, because the postmodern types, the Marxists, as we talked about earlier, I know that postmodernists and Marxists aren't the same, but what happens to postmodernists is they sneak Marxism in to fill all the gaps that their theory would otherwise have, and then they pretend they're not doing it, but they are. And in any case, you know, the Marxist presupposition is that it's mutual exploitation that defines our economic relationship. But what if it's mutual trust? And I think eBay is a great example of that. It's like, no, wasn't exploitation, because that was certainly possible. It was mutual trust. And, you know, eBay unfroze a lot of capital.
Yes.
Right? And the reason, it wasn't even so much that it was a technological revolution, although it was in some sense. The reason it could do that is because the default transaction between Americans is trust. And that's something, man. That's a hell of an accomplishment. So that's another example of the storage of value in reputation.
Yes.
You know, you guys, speaking broadly, your culture is so bloody civilized that you can depend on the integrity of strangers almost all the time. And just think about how easy that makes your life. Because when you were talking about trust earlier, it's like, well, you have to earn my trust, let's say, in a society that's skeptical. You know how bloody hard it is to earn someone's trust?
Very expensive.
Oh my God, it takes forever, and one exception can violate it. And here we are in this unbelievably fortunate circumstance that characterizes free societies where, no, I'll just trust you, how that be? It's like, well, what kind of fool are you? You just trust a stranger. It's like,
and technologies are so impactful on this, because who would have imagined we now summon a car on a smartphone and jump into the back seat with a stranger for an Uber ride.
Absolutely.
But again, based on that reputation system.
Or use Airbnb.
Right.
You know? Or like one of the things I always thought of as completely miraculous, I've never been able to get accustomed to renting a car at an airport. It's like, it's so ridiculous. You can just fly somewhere that you've never been, where no one knows you, and you can give this guy a card, and he'll give you an $80,000 car that's brand new. It's like, here it is. Sorry it took 5 minutes. Yeah, well, next time maybe you could do it a little quicker. We'll do our best. And that's a complete bloody miracle that works. You think about how unlikely that is, and yet people just take it for granted, and it's all predicated on this underlying trust and on reputational integrity.
Yes, and I want to give credit to your work here again, because it goes all the way down to the Judeo-Christian substructure, right? It's almost like we've been building this system of trust up to the point where we have this culture around us that we're almost blind to, but it minimizes the transaction cost of establishing trust, which unlocks economic abundance.
Absolutely, yeah. There might be no natural resource other than trust. Like, it's the fundamental. I read a good economic analysis at one point of Japan. You know, Japan has almost no natural resources, but it's a society characterized by a tremendous amount of interpersonal integrity. And so they can get a long way, and they do, and did.
Right.
And so trust, it's why it's also so terrifying to see the erosion of public trust in public institutions, and a lot of that's a consequence of the ill-advised use of compulsion.
Absolutely.